Hi, I'm Roy Windham. I'm a film historian and a collector and longtime friend of Hedy Lamarr. I'm here today to talk about the film Algiers, and I'm going to do that with Karie Bible. Hi, Karie.
Hi, Roy. I'm so glad to be here with you discussing this film. I am also a film historian, the in-house tour guide at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and I do a little YouTube show called Hollywood Kitchen. And I'm just really excited to be talking about this movie with you.
Yeah, me too. This will be fun.
We're going to bring you into the exciting, exotic world of the 1938 film Algiers, starring Charles Boyer, Hedy Lamarr, and Jean Lockhart. So when doing our research, Roy and I each found two completely separate stories about how this film originated.
Yes, it's kind of interesting because from what I had read, Louis B. Mayer had heard the success of Pepe Le Moko, and he immediately bought the rights to the film. He originally had it set that it was going to probably be a Spencer Tracy piece. Then it evolved into being a Robert Montgomery piece. But after he learned more about the film, which he hadn't seen yet, he had no interest in producing it. So he sold it to Walter Wanger to have him make the film.
The story that I heard was that Walter Wanger saw Pepe Le Moko in Paris and that he loved it. And he worked with the Egyptian brothers Robert and Raymond Hakim to make a deal to release the French Pepe Le Moko in the United States. But instead of doing that, he tried to prevent it from getting shown in the United States in the what you might call the buy it and bury it strategy. And American audiences didn't actually get to see Pepe Le Moko, the French version, until 1941, when it finally opened here to critical acclaim.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, interesting to see, to really know which was the case, but turned out that it was a good choice for Walter Wanger to do it because it became a huge success.
Definitely, and we're going to talk about the cast, the crew, and all sorts of aspects of this film, which is basically, for the most part, a shot-by-shot remake of Pepe Le Moko, except for the ending.
Pretty remarkable when you watch the films one after the next, how it was frame by frame, about 90% from the original. So I think that probably, in my mind, I always thought, boy, that must have been kind of hard as being a director when you think you're going to direct a film and then all of a sudden the producer says he wants it to be exact replica of someone else's work.
It's kind of a paint by numbers of cinema, if you will.
So, yeah, it always amazes me. But they both are great films and great cast.
Definitely. And Czar of Noir, Eddie Muller, has talked on TCM about how there's a difference in the ending, of course, from the French version to the American version. And Eddie always points out that that says a lot about French culture and the poetic realism versus American culture at the time.
No, definitely. And also we had the Hays Office, which we had to, filmmakers had to abide by more in the 30s after that was passed, the Hays Code. So there were some things where if you watched one film and watched the other, there's a lot more gunshots and in the original versus the American version. So they try to take out some of the violence.
And from what I've read, when the initial draft went to the Hays office, it was deemed unacceptable because the two leading female characters are, quote, kept women.
That's true.
And I also read a memo from the production codes administrator Jones Breen to Wanger. He wanted to changes made regarding the topics of prostitution, sex appeal, Pepe's womanizing, and of course, the ending of the film.
Yes.
Chinese faithful to Confucius.
And Roy, this makes the American debut of Hedy Lamarr, which is a big deal. So give us some background on why that's so significant.
Yeah, well, Mayer put Hedy Lamarr under contract in 1937. And in 1933, she had done the film Ecstasy, which she does appear nude in. And so he always claimed he didn't realize had never seen Ecstasy before he put her under contract. But regardless, she was put under contract, and then when she was came here to the States, they didn't really know he didn't know what to do with her. So they tested her in all different types of roles. All different types of scripts are being written for her. But she pretty much just sat in a lot for 5 months, not working at all, just doing publicity photos. And he wouldn't even let her talk to reporters, so very few interviews are granted. As soon as Hedy arrived in the States, and it was said that she was going to be an actress at MGM, the press immediately started running with the stories about her being nude in a film in 1933. So that was all over the newspaper coverage and magazines. So Mayer didn't want to be associated with that, so he just thought it was best just to keep her quiet and out of the eyes of the reporters to get any information. It made Hedy very upset because she really wanted to continue acting and improve her skills, but she understood too, her number one thing was to learn English. Hedy already spoke 5 different languages before she arrived to the United States, but she knew very few words in English. So she put everything she could into English class. She watched films. Even when she went home, she put on sound records where she could practice her English. And she pretty much became fluent in English within 4 to 5 months, which is pretty remarkable for a young woman in age 23, I believe. That's another thing, too, which kind of blows my mind, is that here she left her native country to America with no friends, no family, no one here, and she was a young woman starting a career finding agents and managers and PR people to help guide her. So it was a pretty remarkable woman she is.
Yes, that's one thing that definitely comes through about Hedy. She was not only exquisitely beautiful, but had such a razor-sharp mind. Mm-hmm. And it had to have been frustrating for her, for people not to recognize that or acknowledge that, because all they saw was what was on the surface.
Yeah, that's true. And then when she was at MGM, she pretty much was just by herself. And since she wasn't working on the film, so she didn't have cast members or any like rehearsals, she was just there sitting really for the next photo shoot. So when Mayer sold the script to Walter Wanger, and Wanger was going to do the film, still wasn't Hedy that was thought to be in the film. Wanger's first thought was to be Sylvia Sidney in the movie, but it was the role of Ines. Now, Ines is played by Sigrid Gurie in the film Algiers. That's considered really the more meaty role for the female lead, and everyone wanted that role. Even Hedy wanted that role, and Sigrid Gurie was assigned to do that role. But when Hedy was cast to play Gabby, Sylvia Sidney had no intention to work with Hedy Lamarr because of her past in Europe, making a film where she was nude. So she backed out of the role. And then Wanger put Sigrid Gurie into that role.
And we've got a little bit of build-up here until Hedy's first appearance. I always think that one of the many things that old Hollywood did so well with filmmaking was the proper introduction of a star. The first time you see a star in a film, that's kind of a defining moment. It says so much about the character, who they are, and exactly what kind of story you were in for. Famous examples, I think, would be the first time you see Rita Hayworth toss back her hair in Gilda. That's the entrance. Or when you see that lipstick roll across the floor to the feet of Lana Turner in Postman Always Rings Twice. Again, those are spectacular entrances in film. And when you have someone like Hedy, you've got to build up, because as we've talked about in preparation for this, her entrance doesn't come until about 18 minutes into this film. So you've kind of got to wait a little bit, which I think builds the tension, builds the suspense of, okay, here it comes, this incredible, beautiful woman who's generating headlines around the world. So let's talk about that all-important introduction.
Yeah, well, I think with Walter Wanger was smart with delaying her appearance, but it did match the original version as well. But there was so much hype on Hedy already at MGM. And then when she was assigned the role in Algiers, United Artists pushed her appearance in the film. So she was on front page newspaper covers, magazines, all talking about this. So the audience were just excited to see her on screen because all they've been able to see is just photographic images of her. And so the anticipation of seeing her was really quite exciting. The audiences were packed waiting for her scene, so it was quite a tease after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes before she finally enters at 18 minutes.
So people can see what all the fuss is about. And Algiers was shot by cinematographer James Wong Howe, who's, of course, as we know, considered one of the greatest in film history. He would earn 10 Academy Award nominations. Algiers would be his first. He would go on to win 2 Oscars. And I found a copy of a James Wong Howe biography, and there's a ton in there about this movie and how he shot it. And talk to us, Roy, about how he went about making sure Hedy's entrance was spectacular, like the steps he took to doing that.
Yeah, well, again, it was shot in in one of the corridors where it was crowded people. And she's with her group, and she walks in, and so you see a glimpse of her from the distance and in shadow. And they purposely have her looking to the left, looking to the right. You never get a full-on shot of her. It's just always kept far away from you. So I could just imagine people in the audience stretching their necks trying to get a better view of Hedy because she was so far away until she started walking closer and closer, and then she steps out of the shadows, and she's in full screen close-up with a light on her, and she was just breathtaking. And the audiences went crazy. They start whistling at her on the screen. Now, Hedy at the premiere, she told me that she was waiting for this entrance because she knew it was going to take a while before she appeared, and then what the reaction was going to be when she first appeared on screen. So when she heard the whistles in Europe, when audience members whistle at the screen, that means they hate what they're seeing. It's a bad picture. So it just completely shocked her, and she started crying in the back row of the theater. And her date, who was actor Reginald Gardner at the time, said, "Hedy, why are you crying?" She goes, "They hate me. They hate me." He goes, No, they love you." She goes, "Well, no, they're whistling. They hate me." He goes, No, they're whistling because they think you're beautiful. That's what men do when they see a beautiful woman. They whistle at them. So she went from this low to a tremendous high, realizing that she was accepted by the men in the audience. And it was quite a cute story that she had told me.
That's awesome. And I've read, too, that James Wong Howe did such a spectacular job on her first close-up on purpose, so that entrance would be so dazzling. But then Hedy wanted that lighting the rest of the film, and that was not as possible because he intentionally made that first shot that spectacular. And the idea was that it was just going to be that first close-up. Is that correct?
I don't know really about much of the filming aspect of it, other than what she had told me, what she experienced on the film. And mostly it was just her going through the motions. And she really was a serious actress. And so since English was really a new language for her, and she was able to say the lines correctly, sometimes she didn't know the complete meaning of the words. So since she spoke French and Charles Boyer spoke French, he often would give her, translated what the script was in French to her. So then when she said the lines, she understood what the meaning was, so that she could give it the right emotion and right inflections on certain lines. So I think that was really helpful to her. So if you kind of look at the original Pepe Le Moko version, a lot of the lighting is still even copied the same. Wow. You know, from that, where she has the close-up of her eyes, the close-up of her lips, the close-up of her jewelry. That was also done in the 1937 version.
It'd almost be fun to just do a side-by-side
Yeah.
like viewing experience.
I did that actually the other night. I did put a couple of scenes side by side, and I was just really kind of surprised how similar most of the shots were.
And having James Wong Howe had to have been a tremendous asset because he's one of the greatest. And also, I think a lot of the behind-the-scenes artists on movies don't often get the credit they deserve because I always theorize that when the average moviegoer sees a movie, they think about the stars, maybe the director, but there's such an army of creative talent that often don't get the credit they deserve. And Marilyn used to sing "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend." I always say, I think if you're an actress, a cinematographer is a girl's best friend.
Oh, no, definitely.
Because they can, if you have a zit, if you're puffy, if you're having a bad hair day, whatever it is, they can transform you into something spectacular.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. And then the article that you had shown me about James Wong Howe, where he had written about how he created a monorail system so the cameras can move through the Casbah, through this whole track.
Yeah.
So it moves smoothly.
Yeah, in the biography about him, it said it was like 1,500-foot long monorail they built through the studio that allowed them to be able to have these overhead shots of the cobblestone streets, the 360 degrees, the Casbah. This must have been a very well-budgeted production to be able to construct something of that nature.
Well, the budget was like $650,000 to make the film.
Wow.
And it had grossed just under $1 million. So it was a huge profit back for them, especially UA for the film. It was a big moneymaker for them, and enough where they re-released the film again in the 1950s, and same thing, it turned a big profit.
And okay, we've got 2 more minutes until Hedy's entrance.
Yeah, oh, the anticipation, people are waiting.
Well, you can feel it, absolutely, absolutely. But timing is everything, so it's coming up. It's coming up.
Yeah, and then this scene here with Sigrid Gurie, if you watch the Pepe Le Moko version, Ines' role was more fiery. She was more intense, where the American version, they toned her down to make her a little bit less fiery and more of just a unintelligent woman in love. I mean, they kind of did make her, I don't know, they lowered her down a bit from the original version where she was had more intensity to her.
I wonder if that was a censorship issue or what prompted that change.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be very interesting to know why they changed that aspect of the film.
All right, it's coming up.
Yeah, because like I said, all the actresses wanted her role based off what they saw in Pepe Le Moko. So here's the scene where Hedy is soon going to be making her entrance when she's going to be walking through the Casbah, and this during the scene where they're chasing Pepe Le Moko through the Casbah, and there's a lot of gunshots. And Hedy arrives here at a distance and getting in shadow.
It's coming up.
And she's turning to one way. She's looking down, getting closer to the camera. And then boom.
There it is.
There she is. First time audiences see her. And what a spectacular face that is.
And Roy, you've often talked about how Hedy had such an exquisitely beautiful profile that oftentimes they just wanted to shoot her in profile. And you could almost make, I joke, a drinking game watching this movie. Every time you see Hedy Lamarr's profile, take a shot because you'll be drunk like halfway through this film.
Yeah, that's what she said, because she really wanted to be a serious actress. And they would go to film a scene, and the director would put her in profile. She said, well, this is my dramatic scene. I want to. If I'm in profile, they're not going to be able to see my expression. And they always say, well, you have such a beautiful profile. That's what the audience want to see. And she would have to constantly fight to get a full face shot so she can show her acting skills.
And once you start to notice the profile thing, I promise you won't unnotice it. You'll constantly do the drinking game, even if you're not drinking, and see anytime the profile comes up, you just...
Even like there, they just showed her in profile and she turns full face, but they still had to get that profile in there. And
there were a lot of great profiles in film history, though. John Barrymore, Norma Shearer, a lot of the stars had these regal, elegant profiles, and I don't know why they kind of honed in on Hedy's even more so sometimes. Look at that shot. Gorgeous.
Yeah. This is great to show the intensity of the Pepe Le Moko, the famous jewel thief. And then he's looking at the pearls.
Wow.
And then those lips and that smile.
I want to read a quote from the James Wong Howe biography. By keeping the faces of the characters hidden in darkness, Howe forced the audience to guess the thoughts and thereby increase their secret quality.
Yeah, great. That's awesome.
Yeah, there's quite a lot that his book has to say about this movie. So there's definitely a tremendous amount of things he did in this film that are still very powerful in the cinema.
Well, this role and Hedy's success from being in this film started a new trend in Hollywood, because before then, the platinum blonde was the rage. And Jean Harlow had just died a few months before this movie came out. And so Hedy, being the brunette and being such a success, everyone in Hollywood started dyeing their hair black. And that became the new rage where even moviegoers, women started dyeing their hair black, and the platinum blonde look phased out.
And when Jean Harlow died, Lana Turner later said, well, the bombshell job was open. Mm-hmm. But I think Lana filled it to a degree, but I think Hedy might have filled it to a larger degree.
Yeah, no, definitely she did. And it wasn't just moviegoers that want to look like her. Everyone started wearing her look. Even Joan Crawford dyed her hair black and parted in the middle for Ice Follies of 1939. And of course, famously, Joan Bennett copied her hair. Same thing. And she wore a wig in the next film, Trade Winds, which was originally Walter Wanger wanted Hedy to do the role. But the success of Algiers, Louis B. Mayer would not loan her out again. So Walter Wanger put Joan Bennett in a black wig to do the role. And then he eventually married Joan Bennett.
And of course, in a bit of a noirish twist, which often happens in these things, Walter Wanger was married to Joan Bennett and guided her career to a pretty large degree. And later on, he suspected Joan Bennett of having an affair with an agent named Jennings Lang. He actually went and shot him, and he accused Jennings Lang of trying to sabotage his marriage to Bennett. Lang survived, scandal ensued, and Walter Wanger actually got off very lightly with a reduced charge and 4 months on the Wayside Honor Farm.
Yeah, good. Another fun part of Hollywood, where even the very famous, wealthy people can act crazy at a time.
Yeah, Hollywood's a lot of things. Boring will never be one of them. Never.
Very true. And I'm sure there's a lot more stories that we haven't even heard of yet that are out there.
Yeah.
So,
in the event of his death, I shall inform you without delay.
Why don't you just declare him dead and be done with it?
You may rest assured that I have the situation well in hand.
The screenplay was written by John Howard Lawson, and he began his writing career in 1928 and earned his final screenwriting credit around 1957. Some notable films he wrote include Sahara, starring Humphrey Bogart, and he earned an Academy Award nomination for writing the 1938 film Blockade. And speaking of noir, additional dialogue on Algiers was provided by James M. Cain, author of the celebrated noir novels Double Indemnity, Mildred Pierce, and of course, The Postman Always Rings Twice.
That's great information. Here on the screen right now, we have Jean Lockhart. And it's kind of interesting. Hedy was really close with Charles Boyer, and they became longtime friends. But the second person she came very close with on the set was Jean Lockhart. They didn't have any really scenes together, but since Hedy was away from her home studio, she spent most of the time on the set watching other scenes being filmed. So in between shots, she would be talking to Jean Lockhart. Hedy had a tendency to kind of more interested in older actors and actresses because she felt they were more interesting, had more knowledge and more life experience. So they became good friends, and she would say that, oh, he used to bring pictures of his teenage daughter and show me, family photos. And of course, Jean Lockhart's daughter grows up to be June Lockhart, famous for Lost in Space and the Lassie TV show and many movies. So it's interesting how a friendship evolves. And when Hedy left MGM and she started producing her own films, she bought the rights to the book The Strange Woman by Ben Ames Williams, and she went back to this film and hired Jean Lockhart to play her elderly husband in the movie. So she made friends, she kept them as friends, and often would give them work.
I love how in Sunset Boulevard, Gloria Swanson had the line, they had faces then. She was absolutely right about that. Mm. Can you think of a character actor today that looks like Jean Lockhart? I mean, they had very distinct character faces.
No, that's very true.
I was going through Jean Lockhart's filmography, and so many classics under his belt. He had supporting roles in His Girl Friday, Meet John Doe, They Died with Their Boots On, and Leave Her to Heaven. I mean, that alone is quite a handful of classics.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Joseph Kalia, he was under contract with MGM as well, and MGM loaned him out to Wanger for this film as well, too. And most people don't know that Joseph Kalia was actually a trained opera singer, and he never really sang in any of his films. He has a small little in The Caddy with Jerry Lewis, where he's older. He sings along to a couple songs, but it's the only time you really hear him singing in a movie.
Oh, wow.
Morning. Nothing unpleasant?
The sets are pretty awesome. And, of course, the costumes are terrific.
Yes, we've got set design by Alexander Tobolov. I was looking into him. He started working as an art director in films in 1927. It seems like he worked on several big-budget movies at MGM. Rasputin and the Empress with the Barrymore family, Queen Christina, and Riptide. And he did get a nomination. By the way, we'll talk about it later, but Algiers got 4 Academy Award nominations, including art direction. And he also was nominated for Vogues of 1938 and John Ford's classic Stagecoach.
Yes, that's pretty impressive.
I really admire art directors because they can take a basic empty soundstage and transform it literally into an entire other world. And I'm sure they work hand in glove with the cinematographer, with everybody to create this world and this complete alternative reality, really.
Yeah, and all built by hand by the set builders, which today it's all built by digital green screen. so it always amazes me when you watch a classic movie and see these sets and realize that they were there while everyone was rehearsing and getting their lines ready and costumes being made and scripts being rewritten and approved. There was people there building these remarkable sets for the films to be shot on.
I get a little sad because sometimes when I watch old films, I think to myself, we're never going to see that again. Yeah. There's never going to be something like these films were, with the sets being real life sets, with the literally cast of thousands and the scale of just the actual filmmaking. I just don't think that's going to be in our present, or definitely not in our future.
True. Yeah, and studios who have some of the backlots with some old sets on them, they still keep on bringing them down, and because they're not being used, and they're just falling away to the wayside because of the construction. They didn't build it as a house that people were going to live in. It was just a facade.
Also, the costume design for Hedy was by Irene, and I definitely wanted to pay tribute to her. Like so many costume designers, she went by one name, even though her real name was Irene Lentz Gibbons. And she did Hedy's costumes for this film. I think, for my money, costume design is such an underappreciated art. You know what shocks me? They didn't even have an Academy Award for Best Costume Design until 1948.
I know, isn't that amazing?
That's only 20 years into the Academy history. It took them that long to come up with that. And it just blows my mind because, in my opinion, the costume tells the story as much as the lighting, as much as the set, as much as the script in many ways.
Oh yeah, and appeal to audience members. I mean, women were there to want to see what the latest trend was going to be, and of course, actually, this was Irene's fifth movie. She had worked with Walter Wanger before on the Vogues of 1938 or 37.
I think it's 38.
38, and but this was her fifth film, and she did a remarkable job with Hedy, putting her into these beautiful gowns with little jackets, and Irene was kind of famous later on for doing women's suits, two-piece suits that became like a rage. And during this time in the 30s, Irene had her own showroom at Bullock's Wilshire, and so her gowns were able to be purchased by the public, and so she already had a following from that. So Hedy worked with her on this film and worked with her one more time in 1943 at MGM on the film The Heavenly Body, which was filmed in black and white, which most Hedy's films were. And for first time, the publicity I read on that was Irene designed all of her clothes and using only black and white fabrics. No color fabric was used, where in black and white films, reds can be used and it still appears black. But for some reason, she just tried to do a whole black and white wardrobe, which read nicely. I just don't really see what the difference was.
Well, I've always, in reading about a lot of Hollywood costume designers then and now, I think you had to be a politician on a pretty big scale because you had to navigate censorship problems, studio politics, really tight budgets, tight deadlines, very fragile star egos. And all the while, you've got to serve the film's narrative. So it's kind of like you have many, many, many masters to please. And that had to have been a very high-stress kind of job. And by the way, I think that Irene's time at Bullock's Wilshire in downtown was about 1933 to 1942. And then when Adrian stepped down, that was around the time that Irene was appointed head of MGM costume design. Today, the Bullock's Wilshire building in downtown LA is now the Southwestern Law School, but I'm in the Art Deco Society in Los Angeles, and maybe once or twice a year, we will, in conjunction with them, open up that building.
Oh, nice.
And you can actually, the tickets sell out very fast, but you can go inside and you can see Irene's salon, and you can see where a lot of the Hollywood stars would have shopped and brought her style and her fashions, which was really, really fun to experience and see.
Yeah.
You ready, Gabby? Andre just phoned. They're
So
waiting on the
here in this scene is Claudia Dell, who plays Hedy's friend in the film, and Claudia Dell, the head of Columbia Pictures, thought she was so beautiful that he used her image for their logo of the opening credits of all the Paramount movies of the woman holding the torch.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was based on Claudia Dell.
Remember the time?
I love the brooch that Hedy is wearing on the jacket, the Irene jacket, too. That's very, catches the light.
Yeah, and the cut of the neckline and opening of the jacket really is a nice geometrical style.
Very flattering.
You know, even the way it's cut at the bottom.
After all, you don't marry for fun. I didn't. So, Inspector, you've already lived.
And by the way, Irene earned 2 Academy Award nominations, one for Best Costume Design. They used to have black and white and color, separate categories. So she was nominated for Best Costume Design Black and White for the 1948 film BF's Daughter, starring Barbara Stanwyck. And her second nomination was for Best Costume Design Color for Midnight Lace in 1960, starring Doris Day. Tragically, Irene was in love with Gary Cooper. We have another noirish twist behind the scenes here. She was in love with Gary Cooper, but whether or not that was requited is unknown. Gary Cooper had died in 1961, and the following year, Irene checked into the Knickerbocker Hotel in Hollywood and jumped out the window and died by suicide. And of course, it's a terrible end, but her work lives on, thanks, of course, to the movies. And I don't think she's nearly as well remembered as her contemporaries like Edith Head or Adrienne or Travis Banton. But I hope that's changing, because I read somewhere that Irene has influenced costume designers in the modern era, including Colleen Atwood and Greg Lavoie. In fact, in 2014, Greg Lavoie even revived Irene's old fashion line and brought it back. And there's also a book called Irene, a designer from the golden age of Hollywood, the MGM years, from 1942 to 1949.
Yeah.
And that book is by Frank Bedici.
So here we have Sigrid Gurie on screen with Charles Boyer. And Sigrid Gurie came just after finishing The Adventures of Marco Polo, which really put her onto on the map as being a new upcoming star in films. Again, she played an exotic character in that film as well as in this film.
I noticed her career was not a very long one. She maybe had about a 10-year run. Why do you think that was?
I don't know. I knew that she later on became an artist, and so she concentrated mostly on her artwork in her later life. But it could have been that she just wasn't given the roles. Sometimes you do these exotic characters, and then studio heads can't see you anything other than that, and and she didn't want to keep on playing these same types of roles.
That's very true.
But Hedy and her became pretty good friends on the set because Sigrid Gurie is able to speak German, so they. I always think about Hedy being on a set of a film. She would tell me that she would sometimes go home exhausted because she would say her lines in English, she would talk to someone in French, she would talk to someone in German, she would talk to someone in Russian. She would. So she was going from one language to the next, and by the time she got home, she was so mentally drained because she kept on going from one language to the next.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
This film was directed, by the way, by John Cromwell, and he began his career as an actor and director on the stage, and he came to Hollywood at the dawn of the sound era. His theatrical training was probably pretty helpful in guiding certain performers with very sensitive material. He adapted the Sinclair Lewis novel Anne Vickers in 1933 to the screen, and then Somerset Maugham's novel of Human Bondage in 1934. That would prove a breakthrough for star Bette Davis and further establish Cromwell's reputation. Over the course of his career, he directed 9 different stars to career-defining performances and Academy Award nominations. He also contributed to the film noir genre, and he directed the films Dead Reckoning, Caged, I love Caged, The Company She Keeps, and The Racket. Unfortunately, RKO owner Howard Hughes falsely accused him of being a communist during the Red Scare, and Cromwell was blacklisted for 7 years from the business. And he finally emerged in 1958 and directed 3 more films. And by the way, his son is actor James Cromwell, who earned an Oscar nomination for the film Babe, and also played the Lieutenant Dudley in the classic L.A. Confidential.
Yeah. They both had great careers, father and son.
And speaking of another father and son, there's like 3 people involved in this cast that had legacy or children that went on to show business too. Alan Hale Jr. and Alan Hale.
Yes.
Alan Hale's a character actor that's in Algiers.
Now, here on the screen right now we have Joan Woodbury, and she's the great niece of the Woodbury soap chain, and she did a few films, but she later on, she was originally a dancer, and then later she married Henri Wilcoxon, who's a very famous actor who was in Samson, Delilah, Cleopatra, all DeMille films. DeMille and him were like best friends, and so and all 3 of their children was with Henri Wilcoxon and Joan Woodbury. He was married 2 more times after they divorced, but didn't have any other children. But Joan Woodbury is kind of famous because in the 40s there was a movie series called Brenda Starr, Detective, and she was Brenda Starr, the lead. And so she had this fame after this movie of being Brenda Starr.
And Alan Hale, we were talking about him a minute ago. His career goes back to early silent film. And he had a role in The 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse with Rudolph Valentino in 1921. And I noticed that he played Little John in the Robin Hood story 3 different times. In 1922, he was Little John opposite Douglas Fairbanks. And then in 1938, he was in The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. And the final film of his career was Rogues at Sherwood Forest in 1950, where also he played Little John. So it's 3 times in 3 different eras where he played the role of Little John.
Is that amazing?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting trivia there.
Yeah, everyone loves Alan Hale. He was such a great actor. He was very endearing in many roles when you saw him on screen, and again in very, very important pictures as well.
Yeah, I looked on his filmography, and he was in so many terrific films, including It Happened One Night, the 1934 version of Imitation of Life, and the Barbara Stanwyck film Stella Dallas.
Yeah, he also was a trained opera singer. He wanted to be an opera singer, and didn't work out for him, but film obviously did. And then he's also credited for inventing the movie theater folding seats. The seats in the theaters, they just were stationary, and he came up with the idea to have them fold up, and that's attributed to an invention of his.
Wow. So 2 inventors in the cast,
Yeah,
Hedy and him.
Yeah, Hedy came up with frequency hopping, which to help try to stop World War II, and was to be changing frequencies inside of a torpedo, where the enemy couldn't catch the frequency because they kept on changing. Her patent was accepted, and but for some reason the government looked at it and thought it wouldn't work and didn't even try doing it. They just set it aside, and then they realized later in 1958 that it did work, and they started using it in every weapon that they had built since 1958 is all based off of Hedy Lamarr's invention that she did with musician George Antheil. And the original idea was based on Hedy's idea of how a player piano can change notes automatically. And so her idea was to build the paper roll of changing notes inside of a torpedo. But when the government saw the patent and were going to put it together, they thought they had to put a whole player piano inside of a torpedo and thought it wouldn't work. But it was nothing to do with the whole piano. It was just the paper roll. And then it evolved into today, where frequency hopping is the basis of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, even back in the days where your home phone changed channels to find a better signal was all based on Hedy's original invention.
Did she ever really get the proper credit or any financial compensation?
Nothing from the
invention?
government, but she's always told me I gave it to them free because I'm from Austria, and what was going on in Europe was horrific during World War II, and she didn't want any compensation. She wanted to do anything she could to stop the war. And she said it would have been nice if they would have gave her some acknowledgement when they started using it, but they didn't. And then in 1984, Hedy had mentioned to me about her invention, and I had never heard about it. I contacted the patents office, and they finally, a really nice man there, took him about a week to find the patent, because Hedy, when she filed it, she didn't file it under Hedy Lamarr. She filed it under her legal name at that time was Hedy Kessler Markey, because she was married to Jean Markey at the time. And so I got a copy of the patent, and then I believe the patent office may have told the story to Forbes magazine, and Forbes magazine wrote an article on it. And then since '84, it's just been picking up momentum about her invention. And then finally in the mid-1990s, she was really honored with awards and plaques, inducted into the Inventors Hall of Fame. And all this while she still was alive. She died in the year 2000, January 19th. So she got to see it. She didn't go to any of the presentations. Her son, Anthony Loader, went and gathered all of her awards for her. There's a real sweet video on YouTube where he was there accepting an award for her. And she happened to call him while he was on stage, asking how it went. And so he puts her on speaker and says, "I'm here doing it now, Mom. You have anything you want to say?" And she says, "It's about time." She was honored. So she's very cute. She had a wonderful sense of humor.
I think in our culture, people have a hard time believing that a woman can be beautiful and intelligent. It's almost like there's some people that can't wrap their mind around that possibility. And it's unfortunate because it happens all the time, even today. I'm just so glad to know that Hedy did get acknowledgement in her lifetime. That is really good.
No, definitely. And more than anything, I was excited for her, but I'm also excited for her legacy for her family. So the legacy before that was just their mother was a beautiful actress in films, but the idea now that they have the legacy of their mother contributing to the entire world with her invention is pretty remarkable. I'm very proud of her and happy for the family for that.
Absolutely. You've told me so many stories about your friendship with Hedy and what a curious mind she had when she would meet other people. She wanted to know everything about them. Tell me, like, little day-to-day details of what Hedy was like.
Well, she was very curious. You know, people sometimes think I'm putting her down when I say she has a childlike mind, but it wasn't like she was not smart. She just was inquisitive, and I think she was raised by her father to always ask questions and always learn. And so I remember when I used to go visit her, and I actually would stay with her in her home for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And I'm thinking, I'm going to ask her this about this and this movie and this and that. And I could barely get a word in edgewise because she was asking me all about my business and what did I do. So she was more, you will leave. I think that's probably one of the most endearing things about her. Anyone you met her and was able to have a conversation with her, they didn't leave like they just met a movie star. They left, feel like they met someone who cared about them as well. And that's, I think, a very refreshing thing where I think most people, they meet a star and it's always about the star. But the idea to walk away from it is that the star was also interested in themselves was quite sweet. And I've heard many stories where people would continuously say that she was a wonderful friend and very interested in their lives.
That's what I've always tried to get across on my cemetery tour is that these people, many of these actresses may have been sex symbols, bombshells, icons, movie stars, but at the end of the day, they're people. Mm-hmm. And they're nuanced, they're complicated, they're smart, they've got a story to tell, and there's so much more than what's sitting right there on the surface.
Oh, no, definitely. And Hedy was definitely like that. And she was beautiful. And she realized she really never thought of herself originally as being beautiful. Her family was not into constantly telling her she was a beautiful little girl or she was pretty. They wanted her to concentrate on education and learning. And And she would tell me stories where she wished she had long hair, but her mother always kept her hair really short. And then that she used to play, she used to get the yarn and make braids and put them on top of her head and pretend she had long hair. So her mother said, don't stare in the mirror, that's vanity, don't stare at yourself. So I think later on she realizes that how her beauty was important and a part of her career. And then she finally started accepting that. But her first thought was she wanted to be an actress.
I read a quote from her that said, any girl can look glamorous. All she has to do is stand still and look stupid.
That's it. That's what they wanted her to do. They wanted her to show no emotion. She had a hard time with photographers. And even Louis B. Mayer, he was very cruel with his comments about his actresses. And he would tell Hedy, you can't smile, big smile in a film because it makes your face look comical. You can't show your legs because your legs are too thick. You have a weak chin. You constantly, and then, when you're a woman of 22, 23, 24, and you have someone as important as Louis B. Mayer pointing out what he thought were faults, I think it would take a toll on anybody.
Also, I think they probably use that as a way to control these actresses and a way to kind of keep them under their thumb, and I don't know, that's just heartbreaking the way they treated them because they don't deserve that. They didn't. And they are just so interesting as people and just had so much more to offer. And they absolutely deserve to be treated with so much more respect.
Now look at her talent. I mean, her face, where she just gives all these different expressions where she's angry and then she's calm. And then there's a hint of a smile. I mean, she really has a great acting ability with facial expressions.
I'm noticing, because when we were watching and prepping for this, I had a link and I was watching it on my laptop. I'm noticing stuff on the screen in this room we're in now that I did not notice at home. And it's almost like I'm seeing it for the first time going, I didn't notice that. But I think there were so many performers back then. I think Marlene Dietrich had this problem too. People would say they weren't great actresses. But I say, if you watch closely what they're doing, they are doing things. Absolutely. I think it's just subtle. And I think it's not super over the top, super in your face, and what audiences maybe were expecting. I think Al Pacino had that problem too. People said he was doing nothing in the rushes of The Godfather until they saw the film and realized he was. It's just such a different style of acting.
And the chemistry here on screen between Boye and Hedy is remarkable. She loved to dance. You can see how happy she is, even though it's a scene from a film. But it's just, she had great movement and just a remarkable figure when you saw her in full length dancing there. Which, again, Louis B. Mayer did not like her figure because she has small breasts and would constantly said no pin-up pictures for her because she doesn't have a voluptuous body.
That is what I call insanity. And, there's a quote in the James Wong Howe book, if I can read this. One move of particular dramatic impact occurs when Howe's camera follows Pepe and Lamarr around the cafe as they dance. The move recalls a similar one in the film Walking Down Broadway, in which Stroheim suggested Howe make the camera dance along with the characters by placing it on a movable lampstand.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much talent. And Hedy was interested in things like that. She would ask questions on the set. She would work often with the cameraman, the lighting people. She wanted to learn how things worked. She had, again, a very inquisitive mind. I've seen pictures of her operating a movie camera, inside editing rooms, just because her curiosity was there. She had a drafting table put in her home. She had an office where she would constantly draw and invent and design things. She dated Howard Hughes for a while. He took her to his laboratories and introduced her to all his scientists that were working there. And then when they left, he said to her, anything you want my scientists to do, just come here, they'll do it for you. And I think she probably was the only actress that ever took him up on it. She spent more time with the scientist than she did with him after that. And here we have Johnny Downs. He was in one of the original Little Rascals. And later on, he, in the 50s, started his own television show called the Johnny Downs Show. And he played they showed reruns of Little Rascals, our gang Little Rascals, and he did the introduction as the character Johnny Jet. So he evolved into his own children's show. But anyway, so back to Howard Hughes. So Howard Hughes always wanted to build a faster plane. So Hedy went to her drafting table and thought, well, how do birds fly and how do fish swim so fast? And so she started looking at pictures of both and started noticing that the wings on a bird and the gills on a fish go at a diagonal, where planes back then the wings went straight out. So she drew a airplane with the wings going on an angle downward. And Howard Hughes created first plane that had the wings that went on an angle instead of straight across, and was able to get more speed on his planes. And to this day, all planes have the angles of a downward of the wings. She didn't patent that or anything like that. It was just her idea.
This is such a different movie in a larger format, I have to say.
Yeah, in the original version, this scene is a little bit more violent. There's more gunshots, where he's shot multiple times, where I'm assuming the censors had them reduce the scene to one shot.
And by the way, when Algiers was released, it got terrific reviews. The Hollywood Reporter raved it was one of the gems of this or any other great year. And it predicted that Hedy was destined to reach great heights if given the proper material. It went on to say, quote, "She has more sex, more beauty than the screen has seen for many days, and with definite artistry that will merit the best MGM has to offer."
Well, MGM had it right when they started making our first film, I Take This Woman, and they had Joseph von Sternberg direct it. And of course, he directed Marlene Dietrich, which they had a great relationship on film and kind of really solidified her American career in film. And he was doing the same with Hedy, making her a little bit more sensual, and they kept having run-ins with censors, and Mayer didn't like what was happening, and so he ended up firing Joseph von Sternberg. And only a few scenes that he did remain in the film. And you kind of notice them, because here in Algiers was the first time they gave Hedy a little bit of a widow's peak, where she didn't have a natural widow's peak in her hairline. So Sternberg picked that up. And then I Take This Woman, there's some scenes she has a little bit of a widow's peak, and some scenes she doesn't have the widow's peak. And that's where you can see what scenes he filmed of her.
Variety raved. Favorable word of mouth should make it a popular attraction. I love the way the verbiage on vintage movie reviews. I love the way they write. And the New York Times wrote, quote, "Few films of this season or any other sustained their mood so brilliantly." I like that quote too.
Yeah, it is good.
Everything you would have done, Pepe. I was all alone at the cemetery. I followed the custom of your people, a handful of earth on the body.
By the way, this film, so it did get 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Actor for Charles Boyer, Best Supporting Actor for Jean Lockhart, Art Direction for Alexander Tolubov. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Better you than me.
And Best Cinematography for James Wong Howe. It did go home empty-handed on Oscar night, but for context, Charles Boyer was up against the following actors for the trophy: James Cagney for Angels with Dirty Faces, Robert Donut for The Citadel, Leslie Howard in Pygmalion, and Spencer Tracy for Boys Town. And of course, Spencer took home the Academy Award. Meanwhile, Jean Lockhart faced off against Walter Brennan for Kentucky, John Garfield in Four Daughters, Robert Morley in Marie Antoinette, and Basil Rathbone in If I Were King. Walter Brennan ultimately won the Best Supporting Actor award.
All good actors and all good performances.
Yeah, it's really hard to pick one over the other, especially in these cases.
Now, Charles Boyer, of course, has always been quoted when people do impressions of him as "come with me to the Casbah," and it's actually a line he never says in the film. So it's interesting how that even today, those people will still say that phrase when they do a Charles Boyer impression.
And it inspired the character of Pepe Le Pew.
Yes, the cartoon, famous cartoon, Pepe Le Pew, which I always think that beautiful cat is Hedy. That he's always chasing. So
that's what you're so sorry about.
Why are you standing there, staring at me? Do as I told you. Go on. And you too, get out. I've had enough. And you, I'm sick of looking at you.
A lot of movie actresses had these light blue eyes, like Sigrid Gurie, who was just on screen. You see how light her eyes were. Mm-hmm. And that was always kind of hard when their eyes were so light to catch on film, that their eyes became translucent, and it kind of sometimes looked a little awkward, especially in the silent era. So Zheng Zhuanghao used black velvet behind the camera so that it reflected in their eyes and gave them a natural look, so their eyes weren't so translucent.
It said in his biography that Hao combined all the lessons he'd learned from his entire career up to Algiers, and that all of those lessons kind of culminated in this film. And the book says, quote, "It demonstrates his mastery of past technique and foreshadows his evolution into the new realm of documentary realism in the next decade." End quote.
I'm going down. Get out of the way. Let me go. When I please, I said. And what I please is now. Get out of my way.
The film is really good. I mean, it really keeps your attention from start to finish. There really isn't an area where it lags. And it's, I think, especially during this time, people audience members really loved the idea of being able to see a foreign country, what it was like if they went on a trip to see how other people lived. And it was kind of exciting to see these cobblestone roads and corridors and people living so close to each other, and the exotic costumes and fabrics that were used.
I think it's one of the things movies have always done best, is sort of sweep us into other worlds and kind of take us away from our lives and our problems and our current situations and just transport us across time.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Again, such beautiful shadows all throughout this set. I mean, I honestly wish I could get in a time machine and see this monorail system that James Zhuanghao had constructed through this set.
And this is a good scene, very dramatic, where he is wants to leave, and Ines does whatever she can to stop him from leaving.
Where is she?
But
You lied to me, didn't you?
she loved him, but he didn't love her back.
Tell me the story about Charles Boyer and Hedy not working together on Gaslight, because that's a real interesting thing to think of.
Yeah, Hedy and Boyer became good friends after this, and they saw each other regularly at each other's homes and have dinner. And when he was married, and she was married, and so and they later in 1941 teamed up again to do Algiers on Lux Radio, And so they worked together again. And then in 46, Gaslight was written, and MGM wanted Hedy to play the lead. And but they told her that George Cukor was directing. Now, most actresses adored Cukor and wanted to work with him. But Hedy had an incident with him back in 39. Hedy was the first choice by W.S. Van Dyke to play Crystal in the film The Women, which just famously stars all the MGM women: Norma Shearer, Rosalind Russell, Joan Crawford. Well, Joan Crawford later got that role of Crystal, but Mayer didn't want Hedy to play the role. He didn't want her playing the other woman. He didn't think it was a good part for her, so he said no to her being in the movie. Then later, W.S. Van Dyke was out, and then George Cukor was brought in, and Cukor had known the story about Hedy being the part of Crystal. And Mayer wanted all of his female actresses to go to the set of The Women and pose for publicity. So he sent Hedy over there just to pose with the other actresses on the all-woman cast of The Women. And Hedy got there first, and it was just the crew and Cukor. And Cukor came up to Hedy and said, "Oh, Hedy, I agree. You should have had the part of Crystal. I think the part would have been perfect for you. I would have liked that too." And she goes, "Oh, this wasn't meant to be." And he hands her the script, and he said, "I'd be fun for you to do a line from as Crystal. I want to see how you would have done this part." So without even thinking about it, she just took the script and started reading a line of Crystal. And of course, who walks in at the time? Joan Crawford, who went ballistic to see Hedy Lamarr doing her lines. So she called Hedy every name in the book, and Hedy didn't want to tell me the words, but I know one of them was start with the letter B. and just went off on her for quite a while. And Cukor did not step in and say, "Oh, it was my idea," so, whatever. Didn't do anything to calm it down. Just let it continue. The crew even turned their backs to it all and just started doing their thing and ignored. And no one came in to step in. It all ended with the argument ended, and the photographer showed up and took pictures of Hedy and Crawford together. And there's one picture you can see published where Hedy has it seemed a little glassy-eyed. I think maybe she was fighting back a tear.
Oh, I saw that picture, and I was like, oh my gosh, that absolutely checks out with the story.
Yeah, and so so from that point on, she never wanted to work with Cukor. But she said she would have worked with Cukor if she knew that the lead in Gaslight was Charles Boyer, because she would have done anything, work with him again. And but she still loved the film Gaslight. She thought it was a great script. She thought Ingrid Bergman was fantastic in it. She had nothing wrong to say about the film, other than she regretted that she wasn't in it for her reasonings that I just said. She later did it on Lux Radio, and she was pretty good. She says the only thing she would have done differently if she was in the film, she said she would have been played it a little bit crazier than Ingrid did, where she would let audiences really think that maybe she did snap and lose her mind. But other than that, she thought Ingrid was a very talented actress. Ingrid took a lot of roles Hedy turned down, or Hedy was originally supposed to be cast in. Hedy was supposed to be, Warner Brothers wanted Hedy to be the original in Casablanca, and Mayer wouldn't loan her out. Hedy said she had read the script and was not interested in it anyway. The script had gone through so many rewrites. It did turn out to be obviously a classic, but no one wanted to do the movie on the original script. And then Hedy turned down Saratoga Drunk with Gary Cooper. Ingrid Bergman took that as well. So Hedy and Ingrid had a little bit of a connection over there with the roles going back and forth.
It's so interesting to think about filmdom's could-have-beens. And also, in addition to Pepe Le Moko and Algiers, The film was remade again in 1948, and this time it was a musical starring Tony Martin and Yvonne De Carlo, and directed by John Barry. And then in 1949, the Italian comedian Toto turned the story into a satire with the release of Toto le Moco.
Yeah, I remember Hedy telling me about this movie was all based on what MGM was going to do with her. If the movie flopped or she got bad reviews, she knew her career was over at MGM. So she already had it figured out if she had lost her contract. And she said she was just going to open a charm school and teach women how to walk and whatever they teach you in charm school, which I don't think they don't have anymore. But it was kind of interesting how she already, again, at a young woman at 23, was preparing to start her own business.
Again, her brilliant mind, it's always seeking something out.
Yeah.
Again, these gorgeous labyrinth sets of Algiers are really spectacular.
Yeah. And then Irene, the costume designer, put Hedy into these hats, and then at the end into the turban, which again started another trend with women wearing turbans in films. So much so that even Adrian at MGM, when Hedy came back to do I Take This Woman, he had her wear a turban, and then in the second film, Lady of the Tropics, she again wore another turban. So not all women can carry put wearing a turban. People always say you have to, if you're really truly beautiful, is if you could wear a turban and have no hair being seen, that show that you have a beautiful face. So Hedy was able to definitely do that. So.
Oh, sure. I would think a turban, you can't hide behind anything with a turban.
Yeah, no hair to shape your face or, bounce around. And talking about hair, Hedy is famous for the brunette, and everyone thinks Hedy had black hair. And she did in films because they dyed it black, but she really didn't have black hair. She was born a redhead.
Oh, wow.
And she had auburn hair. Many articles I've read of her in Europe talking about beautiful auburn-haired Hedy Lamarr. And her hair was dark, but was red. So, a lot of publicity shots later in the 40s that were taken of her kind of not so much in a role, but just being herself. She had let her hair go natural. And so you'll see actually photos of her with her dark red hair, which accounted for her beautiful light eyes, which everyone doesn't know how to, what color they are. Everyone says one thing or the next, but they really are a light gray. And whatever she wore, it picked up that color. So sometimes they appeared blue, sometimes they appeared green.
And I love the moving camera work in this film, too. You just have to stop occasionally and notice it because it's so well done.
Yeah. And this song, C'est la vie, became a big hit.
And Charles Boyer had so many classics under his own belt, with notable films like Love Affair with Irene Dunne, Hold Back the Dawn with Olivia de Havilland, All This in Heaven 2 with Bette Davis, and Conquest with Greta Garbo. That's quite a workout right there.
Oh,
those are
definitely.
some incredible actresses to work with. And he got 4 Academy Award nominations throughout his career.
And he died tragically. He was so in love with his wife that after she passed away, he committed suicide the next day.
We've got a lot of noir backstory going on with the behind the scenes in this film, too. I find it interesting, though, learning about people's lives, what made them tick, what made them who they were, and I think everybody has a story, and most of them are very interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. And he lost his hair when he was in his late 20s. And so almost all the movies, he's wearing a toupee. And then it was just for film. And in his personal life, he always went out bald. He didn't wear a toupee in his personal life.
And he did transition to character parts later in his career and was able to kind of make that transition from young leading man to, middle-aged character actor and beyond.
Yeah, and even though he aged, he still looked like Charles Boyer. It was pretty fun to see him on screen with the gray hair and the gray mustache, and you just knew right away, especially that voice. But just looking at him was like, oh, Charles Boyer, look at him, So...
Many of these stars of Hollywood's golden age, they had such a commanding presence. Like when any of them would have walked into a room, I'm sure conversation ceased because they could just walk in and take over,
right.
Just by virtue of their presence alone.
She attracts too much attention, excites too much desire.
I can't remember his name, but he appeared in so many top movies, and he normally always played a butler. But a butler with a decent part. So it's kind of nice to see him as in a different role.
Come in.
Sorry to disturb you. You're going out?
And this scene kind of really shows that, that she was a kept woman, and that, she was marrying him just for his money, but she let him know that. And but at this point, she didn't care anymore because she has fallen in love with Charles Boyer. And here she is with another version of a turban.
I love the jewelry in this film, too.
Yeah. A lot of the jewelry in the movie, in Hedy's movies, is her own personal jewelry. She constantly would bring her own jewelry to the set.
Wow. It's very eye-catching, but yet it doesn't take away from her.
Mm-mm. And she loved pearls. Was her favorite piece of jewelry were pearls. Most likely those are her actual pearl earrings. And she had a very famous pearl ring she wore all the time.
Why do you think I'm marrying you?
Normally she didn't want men to buy her pearls. She would buy them for herself, because truly in her mind, the only man who truly bought her a pearl who loved her was her father.
Aww.
When she was 16 years old, he bought her a pearl necklace, which when I knew her when she was in her 80s, she still had that pearl necklace there on her dressing table.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Goodbye.
Do it, Karie, don't.
Yeah, Hedy was an actress who actually could cry on command. If the scene required her to cry, she could actually bring up the tears without having any drops put into her eyes. She said she would just go back to the memory of finding her father, who had died of a heart attack.
Wow. Tell me the story about Hedy getting named by Louis B. Mayer, because that's a very interesting story, I think.
Yeah. Well, Hedy, she left her kind of controlling husband and escaped from him. And she went to France. And from France, she went to London. And in London, she had met Otto Preminger, who she had worked with in Austria. And he directed a couple plays that she was in. She was in Private Lives and The Weaker Sex, and he directed both of those. So they had a relationship, and he said, Hedy, you need to meet Louis B. Mayer. He's in town looking for talent, and he's leaving tomorrow. So he brought her to a party where Louis B. Mayer was, and Mayer was interested in her because she was so beautiful. But he said, I don't have time for the screen test, so when I get home, I'll send them out for them to do a screen test. They'll send it to me, and I'll decide if I want to put you on a contract. And Hedy didn't want to wait because she thought her husband was going to find her and take her back to Austria, and she wanted to leave. So she booked this passage on the same ship that Louis B. Mayer was on. And since she had a famous name of as Hedy Kessler, and her husband was well known, she coordinated a charity benefit on the ship. and Louis Mayer attended it. And she got all dressed up, and when she entered the room, everyone stopped talking and gasped and looked up at her. And she knew from that point, when Mayer looked at her in this empty, quiet room, that she was going to get her contract that night. So he put her under contract, and her, without even seeing any of her work, at $500 a week. And he did not like her name, so we need to change your last name from Kessler to something else. And she was fine with that. So I had a PR person who was there to help translate Hedy with French into English for Mayer. And Hedy wasn't contributing into names at all. They were coming up with all these different names, and they didn't like what was coming up. They decided they were going to keep Hedy. And actually, it's not actually, even though we all say Hedy, and she's fine with that, she says it's actually pronounced Hedy. It rhymes with lady. So that's the German pronunciation of her name. But she forgave me for calling her Hedy all the time. She said everyone does. But anyway, so they said, Hedy, you have to contribute with some idea of a last name. So flippantly, they were on the boat, and she looked at the sea, and she said in French, la mer, the sea, in French. And then all of a sudden, Mayer said, Lamarr, Barbara Lamarr. I love Barbara Lamarr. She's the most beautiful woman in Hollywood at the time, and in the 20s. And they came up with Hedy Lamarr.
He hasn't come back?
I sat up all night.
Can't take care of himself.
I'd like to see him back with what I've got.
That's a great story.
This time I'll make him listen to me.
Yeah, it's interesting how these little things all happen. You know, and there's these little remarks and little ideas, and the idea that they sat there and had brainstorming on a name or of a look or something.
It seems so few stars back then went with their original names. They always had to change them because their real names were just not marquee friendly.
Yeah.
Ever got smallpox?
It's all right, you can talk.
I'm ashamed of myself.
Yeah, Mayer didn't want to have such an ethnic sounding last name. He didn't mind the Hedy part, but he really wanted a last name that didn't sound too harsh. And Kessler was she thought sounded too harsh.
Go on.
It was really a woman who gave me the letter. If I had known the truth, I wouldn't have touched it. I'm an informer. Yes, but I wouldn't have done a thing like that.
You know, I was just thinking that in the repertory revival world, which I follow in Los Angeles and also to a degree in San Francisco and New York, this film just never gets screened. And Pepe Le Moko occasionally does, but this one doesn't. And 1938, there's kind of a lot of films from that year that just sort of don't get their due. It's kind of interesting. I wonder why that is.
Yeah, I don't know.
If I'd sold him. First Pierrot, then Carlos. Bad luck always runs in threes. Your turn will be next, Pepe.
Don't be so sure.
That'd almost be an interesting film retrospective, the forgotten films of 1938.
Yeah, no, it would be.
Yeah, because there's probably a lot of hidden gems just hiding in plain sight from that year.
Yeah, they need to be found if they're not restored.
I had a chance to see him in his cell. He gave me a letter.
It's interesting to me how some major films and major stars can even kind of slip through the cracks a little bit. Because I think sometimes the public tends to gravitate to stars who maybe had a ton of scandal, who were super larger than life, maybe had tons of high-profile marriages, you know, which is, I understand the interest and all, but I feel like there's so many other stars that maybe were a lot more below the radar, but still so wonderful, and they just don't get as much attention.
Yeah,
Service is in the back of the hotel. She'll be watching from her window.
Is that all?
If I'm not mistaken, I think this actor, Leonard Kinski, I'm just not sure I'm saying his name properly, but I think he went on to play the bartender in Casablanca. And he got the role because he was actually Humphrey Bogart's real drinking buddy. They would hang out and go drinking together.
Take good care of you. Did I come back?
But she expects me.
What?
Nothing. I'll wait.
It's kind of interesting when you start looking up these character actors in films, small roles, and see how their careers, what they've involved in. And maybe they stayed as a small role character actor, but they were constantly used over and over again in very prominent films.
I think actually, in a way, that would probably be better than being a huge star, because you can still fly under the radar, not have to deal with the crushing, fame and fans, but still consistently work. Like, that to me would be actually a pretty good deal.
Yeah, and it would be kind of fun too, because from one film to the next, it's all dress up, and then you get to, play a gypsy, or you get to play Arab, or you play a soldier, and so you're just one role to the next. So it would be fun, I would believe.
And a lot of these character actors, they started out in silent film, and it's interesting to see kind of how some of them managed to keep making that transition from silence to early sound to hanging on to a sound career to, from being younger to middle age and older. And it's interesting kind of look at the trajectories of how some of the character actors managed those transitions.
And, Hedy started out in silent, and Ecstasy had some sound in it, so it was kind of part silent, part sound. But she definitely had to face her reaction skills and acting skills, because she studied and trained under Max Reinhardt, so who was the top acting teacher of the time, and so she really, at a young age, at 15 years old, got into film. She wanted to be an actress so bad that she asked her parents if she could have a day off from school to go to the studio. And so her mother wrote her a note asking for 1 day off, and then Hedy added a 0 behind a 1 and got 10 days off. And then she went to the to the studio, and she applied for the script girl position. And they asked her if she had experience, and she lied and said yes. Again, a young girl at 15. So she was on the set. Again, it was a silent film. It wasn't like going over lines. It was just really going over what was being done in the scene. And she overheard them saying that they still hadn't got the part for the secretary. And Hedy said, "I could do it." And they looked at her and said, "Oh, yeah, give the job to her." And so, within a day, she already became a script girl to an actress. And from that, she was able to get 3 more roles, from a co-star to the lead in Ecstasy.
That is what I call a very clever and enterprising young woman.
Yeah. And then she went on stage too. After Ecstasy, it was such a big success. It was nothing shameful for her about doing Ecstasy in Europe, because there was a lot of nudity in film at the time. And it won several awards all throughout Europe. And she then appeared on stage in Berlin as Sissi, Queen of Austria, which is another huge success for her. And got great reviews. She even sang on stage. And then she married Fritz Mandel, and then that's where her acting career ended, because he didn't want her acting anymore. So here we're reaching the end of the film, where Boyer is leaving his safety of not being arrested of the Casbah.
Wait.
They really did a magnificent job with the camera work and the art direction of making this look like it was shot on location and not in a soundstage.
Oh, definitely. And there, her love for Boyer, or for Pepe, she couldn't let him go.
And
So-
I'm sorry.
So much so where she is going to turn him in. She'd rather see him in prison than to go away from her. But with Gabby.
And for those watching this, I would definitely recommend doing maybe a double feature of this and Pepe Le Moko, just to compare the differences, especially at this stage of the films.
expect you.
He is not coming here. He's gone to the boat.
You expect me to believe that?
He is going away with her.
So you're the one to betray him. You couldn't wait to run to me.
Yeah, another one of these classic tragic love stories.
You held a gun in your hands.
I couldn't let him go. I couldn't lose him.
I thought I'd figured all the moves, but I miscalculated.
There seem to be so many of them where the lovers are just destined to never be together at the end of the movie.
And they don't do that so much anymore. Even when they do it, sometimes they have to redo the ending because the studio audiences don't like the lovers not getting together or someone dying. But, drama's good.
To this day, there's people that still argue that there was plenty of room on the door for Leo. So, yeah, even today, I think the problem persists. You can feel the tension building as the climax nears.
Yeah. And even the excitement of being in the audience and never seeing a ship before and seeing the details of these ladders and one floor to the next and the windows and the elegance of the certain levels on the ship. And I love this scene just because it's so gut-wrenching when you're in the audience and he doesn't see her. And she's just sitting in that wrong spot where
Wrong place at the wrong time.
And I love this because you think he sees her, and then you realize the police have caught him. This is different than the Pepe Le Moko version. He doesn't look down, so you don't get the sense that at first that he finally notices her. You only see the arrest. So this adds a little bit more of the gut wrench of the two lovers are not going to be together.
By the way, I believe the music used in Algiers was also the music from Pepe Le Moko as well.
It was. They had used the exact same music. I thought maybe even some footage was the same, but I kind of watched the two movies again last night, and I think the footage is different. But the distant shots of the ship and things like that I thought was the same. But my version of Pepe Le Moko is not as sharp and beautiful quality as this one. So you could see the name of the ship at a distance. I can't really see it on the poor quality of the Pepe Le Moko edition that I have.
Let me wait here until it leaves. It's not much to ask.
I'm sure the women in the audience were just going crazy how much Pepe Le Moko loves Gabby, and that the idea that he just needs to see her one more time. What a heartbreak.
That's a great shot.
There she is. The love of his life. Oh my God, she is so breathtaking.
That's a Queen Christina type shot.
Yeah. And her flashback and memories of him there in the Casbah, and she has to leave. Or she believes he's dead, so that's sad. There's that famous pearl that she wore as hers.
And there's the American ending.
Yes. Unlike the Pepe Le Moko version, where he stays at the fence, handcuffed, and he takes a knife out of his pocket and kills himself.
And so I have my friend.
Hedy Lamarr called that French poetic realism. I think this is our version of American Hollywood realism.
What a great movie. Great love story, tragic ending, but it kept you with so many missions throughout. It's pretty exciting to watch this with you, Karie.
It is, Roy. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for this dive into the world of Algiers.